Mars Red continues to be a pleasant surprise week after week. An adaptation of a stage play that's so different, it's so artsy, and I think the dialogue between Suwa as well as this prostitute is probably like one of the best indicators that, it's very stage-like, it has a stage-like presence, and the storytelling is so tightly woven and just visually distinct. Like, this is honestly, I would argue, one of the higher quality productions, both on a visual, audio, and narrative level. It's just so engaging while constantly throwing these twists and turns at you, like the constant worry of what's going on with Maeda's health. I imagine it has something to do with a heart condition. That seems like the most likely scenario given the amount of times he's kind of like kneeled over holding his chest where his heart is. It feels like most likely the man has some sort of heart condition. I'm not sure if it's an actual disease or maybe he's just overworking himself, but I mean, when your leader is having constant points where he has some sort of spasm that causes him to kind of look like he needs to go to the hospital, it's not a good sign, especially considering that he's been pretty lucky that it's happened outside of battles, either after they've ended or before they've started. If he's fighting a vampire in the middle of a battle and he has to like kneel over because his heart's about to give in or something, would easily die. So it's definitely giving you some things to worry about, because on one hand, Maeda, without a doubt, he's the leader you need for this vampire division. On the flip side, he might actually become more of a hindrance than an ally. I guess time will tell, right? But this episode was once again, I think, such an engaging premise that, I mean, it's the little things that I really enjoy. I don't see it too often in anime, but especially when you get more historical-like series, I feel like there's a lot of prostitute-style storytelling where you don't even necessarily have something built around sexual things, but it's simply an emotional one. I think Suwa's been a pretty fascinating character. He always wears his mask, he keeps his distance, and in this episode we get to see that that mask for him is a way to make sure he doesn't lash out and probably do something he would regret since he's a vampire. The connection that he formed over a pretty short length of time, but I thought it was quite interesting that a young girl, 15, already a prostitute, is willing to do anything for money at this point, because that's just the card she's been dealt. And rather than taking advantage of that situation, he just honestly talks with her, he bonds with her. It's a pretty nurturing relationship, and when he goes to see her again and the clerk saying, oh, we don't have her, but we have better women, he walks away. I like it when anime go that direction where they're clearly building up something that won't last, but it's like even just for a temporary thing, this is a character clearly who feels like he isn't human, right? He wears a mask because he doesn't want to randomly attack someone because he has a thirst for blood. This is a girl who feels like everyone is just using her for her body. Then you have this boy who's, talking like, oh, he's 300 years old, he's a vampire. It just is a really cute relationship, and you knew it wasn't going to last, but it was something that definitely hit me. I thought it was really well done. It was one of those situations that you knew she was going to end up dead by the end of the episode, but the idea that he returned her hairpin and she just requests a song and he doesn't know. So rather than getting mad, rather than throwing a fit, he wants to take the experience from this relationship, even if he only knew her a couple of nights, to try to become a little more human after probably feeling like he's been a monster for how many hundreds of years, right? So teach me a song. It's the little moments that I think really give a series like Mars Red its chance to shine, and I feel like every week has had multiple points like that. The cast, when they were introduced, they kind of had their initial personality. You may not have thought too much of them, but between episodes 3 and 4, with the goodbye between husband and wife, to this week's episode with a simple story surrounding prostitutes and just a large gathering of vampires, from characters like Kursu actually having to learn to use the insane abilities that he has, otherwise characters like Yamagami would have ended up dead. And it's nice to see the difference between the bridge where he had no ability, he had no desire to attack. Here he realized that, he took Maeda's words to heart. If he didn't do anything, then he would end up watching another one die, as he had to continue living on. And the powerful people who get to survive and have to carry those sins honestly have a shittier fate than those who get killed by a bunch of vampires. So just to see like the numerous interactions between the cast, like, it's the little moments that I think really make them all feel like a bunch of people rather than just, here's an actor, here's an anime trope. Like, the conversation with Yamagami where they have this ability to communicate, they use this very interesting frequency which they talk, so only they can hear it if they're like a vampire. It's almost like a radio without actually needing one. And our man here, Yamagami, can't actually do it. He just doesn't know how to do it properly. So he goes off on a mission, and as he's trying to communicate, it's hilarious, but it's kind of frightening. And just to see how they poke fun at one another, it feels like, honestly, this is how it should be. While vampires are a frightening aspect to their world, this to them is no different than a police force patrolling the streets trying to bring down gang activity. They naturally are going to goof off and have these inside jokes, and certain characters will get picked on a little more and maybe they'll storm off and then they'll try to retaliate against you. But it feels like genuine companionship. Like, they are even talking about how they're going to be cutting down their military by like 100,000, and the Vampire Division's funds are pretty much slashed in half, meaning they can't even afford to feed what they have. This is a group that clearly are getting results and are clearly a group that are fit to be funded, but it feels like no one in the higher-ups are really believing in it. So I feel like with the mixture of Maeda's health being a concern, they can't afford to replace him, they can't afford to lose him, but they can't afford to have someone who's not going to be healthy on the battlefield. The uncertainty of where the Vampire Division unit will even go, while simultaneously trying to take down these vampires who are basically smuggling in blood and things like that, similar to drugs when it was outlawed and alcohol when it was outlawed and things like that. It's just so interesting to see how familiar the setting feels with how our own history went, but removing things like alcohol and cigarettes and drugs and things like that and replacing it with things that vampires are using. And it's a pretty frightening but honestly pretty inspiring show just for that. It really does feel like we're watching a play, and sometimes when you get those anime adaptations that are from a stage play, I'm usually not a big fan of them. I feel like they don't translate too well, but I think naturally a story about vampires, it just does. And the moments that really make it feel like, oh, you can tell this was something that an actor on a stage would have been performing, are the moments like a husband and wife last week saying their goodbyes, or someone like Suwa who is just trying to talk with this girl and just wants some companionship here. Not in a sexual way, but just a more nurturing one. It's that type of stuff that you would see on the stage as you're watching from an auditorium audience, right? I think the show is definitely criminally underrated, and it's one of, I think, the season's standout shows. We don't get too many good vampire anime, and I would argue this isn't a good vampire anime. I think it's a great one at this point. I think they're definitely using vampires enough that they remain relevant. The mob was frightening, it was badass, and the number of ways that they're actually making vampires stand out, not only just with the fast movements or teleportation, but the idea of how they communicate with each other from a distance, using different vocal ranges that normal humans couldn't pick up on. It's little things that definitely separate, I think, Mars Red from your run-of-the-mill vampire story. But once again, I have to say the reason that this show works is that its cast of characters, this unit here, is just all equally engaging, and rather than just having your lunatic mad scientist or your silent killer with a mask, you have a bunch of people who are all dealing with their circumstances different. Some who have recently turned, some who have been like that for hundreds of years, and some who are just trying to keep the streets clean, right? It's a very personal military-style police story, and it's really, really good, and it feels like it's just getting better with time. Let me know your thoughts and feelings on this week's episode. Definitely your favorite point in the episode, and where do you think it's going to go with Maeda's health? Because I definitely believe that's a pretty big concern that's going to cause for something tragic to happen down the line. And you even have all the reporter stuff too, where she's getting involved with vampires not even knowing the situation. So there's a lot of good stuff you can point out if you want to let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.